Tokyo, an urban jungle, home to over 35 million people and covering almost 3,000 square miles. A city that seamlessly blends the latest technology with ancient traditions and customs of a culture that's thousands of years old. It's certainly a fascinating place for tourists who spend their time taking in the bright lights, tasting exciting new flavours and experiencing a life so different from their own. But what happens when you take the plunge and decide to live there?
There were no foreigners around, so I remember being extremely intimidated.
Tokyo seemed very foreign, seemed like a long way away from friends and family.
The first time I actually arrived here to stay, it was so different.
A lot of people dream of living abroad, fulfilling their wanderlust and completely immersing themselves in a new culture. However, this comes at a cost. You leave family, friends and a well-known way of life to relocate 6,000 miles away to an unfamiliar environment where foreigners make up just 1.5% of the population. So what's it really like going Gaijin?
I'm not sure anyone looks really at the emotional effect around the move.
When you first arrive somewhere, it's so easy to just retreat and think, I don't want to go out into that world out there.
I was expecting to fit in, but I didn't, so that was pretty tough.
Organised chaos. Culturally refined. Pure and utter madness. Tokyo has a unique and dynamic way of life, unlike any other city. Expats who are assigned here can often find themselves feeling overwhelmed and out of place, as they are forced to deal with both the emotional and psychological effects such a move can have.
Moving from one cultural or social enclave to the other is a disturbance in the person's social tranquility. It's not the same for everyone. It depends on a number of factors, including personality. What it takes for person A to adjust to a new cultural environment may not be the same that it takes for the other person.
As more expats are now travelling with their families, special attention needs to be paid not just to the impact on the person starting a new job, but also how their spouses and children will be affected.
I think companies tend to like you to kind of get out and get adjusted pretty quickly. And I'm not sure they sort of take into account so much the big life change that it is. For the employee, it's often pretty straightforward because you're into an office and everybody's looking after you. But for the family, it can be a bit more traumatic.
Zach moved to Japan with his family from New Zealand in 2001. 15 years later, he's still living in the city and now attends a Japanese university, but it wasn't the smoothest of starts.
I was 7 years old first, so I was just upset of leaving New Zealand. Yeah, and my parents threw me into a public school straight away, and I didn't speak Japanese, so that was pretty tough, and it kind of led to bullying for that. And so we looked into international schools and I ended up going to the British school.
The British school in Tokyo is one of 21 international schools based in the capital and the only one to offer a British-style education. It has around 900 students representing over 60 nationalities, and staff know only too well the difficulties families can face when moving overseas.
It's often the case that parents coming to Japan are finding themselves in a very unfamiliar situation as well. Japan is not like most of the rest of Asia. It's not like working in the Middle East. There are all sorts of things that they're having to deal with, and perhaps that makes them even more concerned about their children.
Yes, he was my biggest worry about changing schools, because it was always harder for him to get uprooted and leave his friends and have to make new friends, and usually it's going into a classroom environment where they already friend groups and being, it was very difficult.
Bradley was 4 when we arrived, Emily was 2. So it was fairly easy to uproot them from friends because they hadn't made really deep friendships. I think when we come to move from Tokyo, it will be difficult probably for both of them. Both of them have had stronger friendships now because they're that bit older.
I enjoyed it. There's a lot more diversity. You get a lot more culture. The change I didn't like. I was happy there. I wanted to finish my school education there because from that point I've been moved around schools about nearly 7-8 times. I just got fed up of it in the end.
Obviously there are quite a lot of times when children find it hard to settle. Less so with the traditionally expat families, the ones who are 2 years here, 3 years somewhere else. Those children are very, very flexible and adaptable. But certainly the unfamiliarity is something that some children find difficult.
It's not just the children who have to face unfamiliarity, as partners and spouses also find themselves in a completely new environment, trying to go about their everyday lives. Public transportation, personal admin, and even food shopping bring about unforeseen difficulties.
The supermarkets are very different, particularly if you compare to the UK. You do so much of your shopping by sight. You're looking at the pictures and you don't know what things are in packets. And here there are so many packets of sauces and stuff. The bread is very different here. You can't buy a nice big loaf of bread. It's like 3 slices and then it's really sweet. All the cuts of meat and stuff are all different as well. You don't know quite which bit of the cow or the pig you're buying.
One of the funny things with Japan is that it's technologically incredibly advanced in some ways, but then in other ways it's not. There's paperwork for blooming everything. I think we kind of figured out that actually shopping would be pretty tricky. I don't think we'd quite got ourselves set up for realising how little English people understand.
Thanks to the large tourist industry in Tokyo, most signs are in both Japanese and English. But once you find yourself off the beaten track, things can quickly get complicated.
One of my ongoing concerns, because I'm still hopeless in terms of learning any Japanese, I'm sorry, I'm just dreadful at that. You're still conscious that you're quite likely to be insulting somebody horribly every time you open your mouth. And I've never quite got over that side of things.
People struggle thinking that if they go to a foreign country that those people should speak their language as opposed to them speaking their language. I've always said we're a guest in other people's country. We should respect that. And I think that's where people find the struggle.
There are kids who spent 6 years or something in Japan, don't know a single word in Japanese. I think it's a really wasted opportunity.
Japan certainly presents foreigners with an overwhelming variety of new and exciting opportunities. Nowhere else in the world would you find banana vending machines, pushchairs for dogs, monks, and anime all in the same city. Despite the obvious differences from the Western lifestyle, there do seem to be several benefits to living in the land of the rising sun.
I really like this, in general, the safety and the cleanliness and the organisation and the politeness of people.
Everything works and there's a logic to at least the sort of everyday bits of life. You can get everything you want. You can eat any food you want at any price you want to pay.
The transport, especially the bus drivers, where they would apologize if they were a minute late. It was you could pretty much plan, and it would go according to plan, maybe a minute here, a minute there.
It would seem that moving to Japan throws expats and their families into the deep end as they have to adapt and ultimately thrive in a completely unfamiliar environment. However, with the world becoming an ever smaller place, it's now a lot easier to create a home away from home.
Travel and tourism, and even recently immigration. These processes have made it easier for people to accept and to adjust to cultural and even religious differences.
You get to know people, you get to have connections around the world now.
Once you're already abroad, you realise that actually the world starts to become quite a small place.
So whether you're a Gaijin for a couple of years or end up becoming a permanent resident, there's no doubt that Tokyo leaves a lasting impact on those who live there.